Hey guys, it's Dan here. Today we're switching gears a little bit. You know, usually on this channel you find corporate finance videos, market finance videos, and today I said, wow, let's try something and post about financial jobs actually. Today I'm going to talk about these 4 different financial jobs. Why these 4 financial jobs in corporate finance? Because, well, I have done all of them in the last 7 years. So I wanted to share my experience with you, the pros, the cons, and especially if you're a beginner, give you some pro tips, maybe how you could get this kind of jobs, how you could improve in these functions. So let's get started, guys. Enjoy. Okay, so first of all, I wanted to give you a little bit of background. I graduated high school back in 2006 in Germany. Then I moved to France to study for 5 years in the south of France, 3 years of business management and 2 years of master in finance. Then I graduated 2011, end of 2011 in France. And then it was time, well, to get to the job market, and I went back to Germany because the German market was way better, and I started as a financial consultant. I have done that for a bit of time until I decided, okay, it's time to move on. Then I became a financial analyst for about a year. Then I decided, okay, let's try something new. Then I became a treasury analyst for about 5 years in different companies. And then that's kind of my new thing. I'm getting into data analysis, especially business intelligence. So I wanted to share my way, my journey. So let's get started with the first one, with the financial consulting. Okay, so I think the best way to do it is for each job I'm gonna show you the pros and cons, and it's not gonna be only objective pros and cons, it's gonna be subjective as well, how I felt it, why I moved, why I stayed, and these kind of things. So let's get started with the pros of the financial consulting. First of all, let's define what financial consulting is. I think you can do it in 2 ways. Either you are self-employed and are trying to get new clients, which is very, very tough, especially if you have very little experience, or you do it like I did it. You work for a big 4 company, for example, PwC. I have worked with them in the financial due diligence team, so it's related to mergers and acquisition, which means I was either working for the buy side, so a client who wants to buy a new company, or sell side, someone who wants to sell his business to someone. A job is a little bit different if you're on buy side or sell side, but these pros and cons are definitely worth it when it comes to all kinds of consulting. So let's get to it. First of all, what is super interesting in consulting, and one of the reasons why I have chosen it in the first place, is it's project work. So actually it's not like a 9 to 5 where you're gonna do the same stuff for the same company every day, but you really do projects. So in my case it was like, okay, we have a buyer of this company, and this deal gonna take 4 weeks. We have 4 weeks to complete it and then move on to the next company. So this is a great way to progress very fast and to see a lot of stuff in a very short period of time. Then there is definitely the tools involved, and you will see that, well, especially when you start at a big 4 company, the first thing they're gonna hammer you and hammer you and hammer you with Excel and PowerPoint, so you really become like a great consultant by really becoming a professional in Excel and in PowerPoint, and that's gonna be helpful for the rest of your life. I can guarantee you that. So make sure Excel, PowerPoint, super important. As well as, for example, if you work in consulting, you will see that you will learn maybe treasury management systems, SAP, and these kind of programs. So that's also very handy for the future. The fast learning. As you see a lot of stuff in a very short period of time, you're gonna learn very, very quickly, which was also one reason why I wanted to choose it, especially at the beginning of my financial career. I also felt that there was a very positive competition when it comes to the new hires. Actually, as a new consultant or as an intern, I think it's fantastic to be there, because you have a lot of other young people who want to learn like you. So it's very competitive, but it's also very nice, a very nice environment to learn and to grow. And then there are two things I didn't know before I started the job. Promotion opportunities are definitely insane compared to the rest of the corporate finance world, like financial analysts or treasury analysts or these kind of things, because I've met some people, and it happens in consulting that if you are very good, you can get promoted very quickly. Actually, there are kind of 5 steps usually in consulting. You start as a consultant, senior consultant, manager, senior manager, and partner. I met people that have done it in 6-7 years, so they were really fantastic. But usually the partners I've met, they have done it between 10, 12, 14 years, something like that. That was in Germany. I'm pretty sure in other countries it's similar. So imagine, I mean, going from 0 to top of the line, if you want, in 10, 12 years. That's pretty amazing, especially when you consider that your salary is roughly multiplied by 7 in 10, 12 years if you're very good. So that's definitely a huge point if you see it long term. Then my last point on the pro side is definitely external job opportunities. I've met a lot of consultants who, for example, were dealing with Siemens as a client. And what happened is actually Siemens were building a new team, and I said, oh, you're a great consultant, I want you in my team. And that's how, because they wanted to switch as well, that's how they got a job at Siemens, for example. So now switching to my cons of financial consulting. First of all, and that's a big con in my opinion, and that's why I switched to another job, is the traveling. The traveling right now, obviously it's pandemic, less traveling and stuff like that, but I'm pretty sure it's gonna bounce back when we go back to normal, because let's see it like this. Your client pays the company a ton of money, and they want to see a face, you know, they don't want to have a Zoom call, they want to see your face over there, they want to ask you 1,000 questions at 11 p.m. if necessary. So a travel is definitely a big drawback in my opinion. It sounds cool when you're starting while you hop on a plane and stuff like that, but actually, you know, when you hop on a plane at 6 a.m. on Monday and going back Friday night, depending on your travel time and stuff like that, you're gonna be pretty exhausted, and that's not a nice thing to do in my opinion. Definitely flexible hours, as I mentioned it before. On the con side, it's not a 9-to-5 job. So you actually, the big problem in my opinion in consulting is you never know when the day finishes. Usually it should finish at 5, 6 or something like that. If you have a big project, maybe it's gonna be 9, it can be 11, it can be 8. So you can never really plan your nighttime if you want, or dinner time or stuff like that. And you can never plan your location either, because you don't know where you're going to be next week. Maybe you're going to be in another city. So that's definitely something to consider. Then there's something I've seen in Europe, maybe in the US or in Asia, it's different. Overtime cap. I've seen many consultants complaining about it actually. At PwC it was like this. You work 250 hours overtime, and let's say over the year you have worked 400 overtime, you're only gonna get the 250 hours overtime paid. Then the cap comes into place, and all the rest above is basically free. So you have worked for free. And then the last thing, and this really depends on the job you're in exactly, is seasonality. Think about audits, for example. People who audit companies, they're gonna have a crazy amount of work, let's say for the first few months of the year, tax as well, and then the rest of the year is pretty low. So it really depends if you like seasonality or not. I would say, to sum up, financial consulting is definitely for young dynamic people who just graduated. In my opinion, you can learn a ton of stuff, you can meet very good people, work on your networking. That's definitely, in my opinion, for young people who are just starting, and maybe who are singles as well, because if you have a family, if you have kids and stuff like that, financial consulting, especially with all the traveling and the long hours, it's maybe not for you. So now let's move on, and the main reason why I switched was especially the traveling and the flexible hours that I didn't like so much, because you have absolutely no planning opportunities. So now from this on, I moved to the financial analyst. As a financial analyst, you will see that you usually work for a company. You are not working for a consultant company anymore, you're working for a real company. So it can be either a startup, growing company, or a Fortune 500 company as well. The job will really depend on the size of the company as well. But now let's move on to the pros. And also wanted to tell you that in Europe, its department will probably be called controlling department, and in the US it's probably going to be FP&A, so financial planning and analysis. Moving on to the pros and cons. In my opinion, the pros, and that's why I took the job as a financial analyst, was the business overview and understanding. Obviously, to financially analyze a business, you have to understand the business model, you have to understand the drivers, you have to understand the data. So the business overview is definitely great because it gives you this big picture. If you're a big picture person, financial analyst is definitely a good choice. Then what is also very rewarding and satisfying in my opinion is that you're gonna turn raw data into reporting. And the most important and interesting thing in my opinion is to build this stuff. So actually you go from raw data and it into something meaningful and beautiful, usually because reporting has to be sexy, otherwise nobody will look at it. That's very important as well. And it's very rewarding if you get good feedback for the reporting you just built. Then there is definitely, in the process, you're gonna learn a lot of tools. Excel is an absolute must, as I just said. PowerPoint, obviously. SAP or Oracle, usually if you're working for a big company. And probably also some accounting tools, because you need to extract that data from accounting, for the past data at least. And probably also some kind of planning tool. So you're gonna learn a lot of tools, and it's gonna be very convenient also for the rest of your career. And then there is also the work with different departments. Think about it, as a financial analyst, you have to analyze the financial component of the company, but to do so and look at the P&L, for example, the profit and loss, you have to understand the revenues, you have to which comes from your operational guys. You have to understand personal costs, so you're gonna be with payroll, what happened with the payroll. You're gonna look at different costs, so you're gonna look at what happened with my costs in the past, who can help me with that kind of stuff. You're gonna talk to Treasury because you need some data for the and these kind of things. So you're gonna be connected to a lot of departments, and you will definitely do past work, so accounting data analysis, and also future data planning. So it's, in my opinion, it's a very rewarding job. So in my opinion, the cons as a financial analyst, first of all, are a monthly work cycle, which means basically, imagine on the 15th of the month you have your reporting deadline, so it's going to be a lot of work until the 15th, and then it really falls until the next cycle starts again. So it's always going crazy and then very slow, crazy again, very slow. So that's something you have to get used to it. And the thing is, in my opinion, you know, at the beginning it's quite exciting, but at some point, I would say after a year or maybe two, it really gets boring because you do all this the same process over and over again. Actually, you think months to months and quarter to quarter, and at some point, it's always the same. Next, in my opinion, and for my taste, it's super accounting heavy. And that's one of the reasons why I decided to become a treasury analyst afterwards. Because let's face it, as a financial analyst, you look at two things. Mainly, you look at the P&L and maybe you look at the balance sheet. But sometimes cash flow is part of your job description, but usually you don't know exactly how the cash flow works because you are very accounting minded here. So then, in my opinion, there is a very limited promotion opportunity in these kind of jobs, because think about it, once you are hired as a financial analyst, usually you become a senior financial analyst after a few years if you're good, and then it's kind of complicated because you will not become the manager of the department, because usually this person sits there and is not moving usually, so this is where you hit a ceiling. Sometimes, and I've seen that with some colleagues, They move to business intelligence, which is a bit related to it, and usually it's a promotion. But if we're only talking financial analyst, usually the ceiling is senior financial analyst. Uh, Otherwise, you are really stepping up to a manager role. And the last thing I've seen many times, especially in the financial analyst world, is think about it, you are working with reporting tools, and a lot of countries or accountants are reporting into your system. And what happens a lot of times is that the tools are not precise enough, the parameters are not right in the system, and then you are always chasing some tech bugs. You're always asking yourself, okay, he or she reported this number, why is it different in my system, what happened with the consolidation, and you spend a ton of time with that, and I think it's pretty annoying. So these were the cons, and as I mentioned, from being a financial analyst, I moved on to being a treasury analyst, and here are the reasons why I did it. Okay, let's get started with the pros for a treasury analyst and the main reason why I switched from being a financial analyst to become a treasury analyst. First of all, here you are dealing with cash, and in my opinion that's very rewarding and great compared to a financial analyst. As I mentioned before, as a financial analyst you are dealing mostly with accounting topics. That's why you will move between the P&L and the balance sheet all the time, and it's gonna be a lot of accounting. Here, as a treasury analyst, you are talking cash flow, you are talking real world, and it's not some fantasy accounting somewhere, you know? So it's the real world, it's cash, and it matters all the time. And you have less room for errors here as well. You are definitely at the pulse of the company. Think about it, cash is king in finance, cash is king everywhere. And if you are dealing with cash, if you are the cash manager, people listen to you generally in a good company, and that's why it's also a constant high pressure job. You know, as a financial analyst, you will have reporting deadlines, and it's going to be ups and downs when it comes to the work cycle. As a treasury analyst, it's much more balanced, because obviously you have some reporting deadlines as well for the cash flow, for example, and mergers and acquisition deals and stuff like that, if your company is growing externally. But definitely you always have high pressure because you have the salaries, you need to pay invoices and stuff like that, so you cannot really mess up. You're not allowed to mess up. Always involved in big decisions, because big decisions are always somewhere related to cash, and from what I've seen, it's pretty interesting, because usually you get the brand new information. Let's say if you're acquiring a big competitor or stuff like that, you need to be in the boat very soon, you need to be in the loop very soon. So in my opinion, it's very interesting to be a treasury analyst for this reason as well. Then there is also the working capital sensitivity. If you don't know what working capital is, I made an entire video here and in the description below which explains step by step working capital. In my opinion, treasury analyst opens your eyes when it comes to working capital. As a financial analyst, you are very focused on the P&L, and but when you become a treasury analyst, you see, okay, but hold on, because between my profits and my cash generation, there is a pretty big gap, and usually it's explained by working capital, which means how are my receivables performing, how are my payables performing, how is my inventory managed. All these things matter a lot. And the reason why I put this one as a big plus is, at some point, if you want to set up your own business, working capital management is one of the most important things you have to know. So it gives you a heads up on this one if necessary. And then definitely also you will learn new tools and technology here. You are working with banks, you are working with money, so it's the technology is very sophisticated. The treasury management systems usually work great, and there's a ton of stuff to learn. So definitely tools and technology, big plus here. Now I'm gonna tell you why I moved from being a treasury analyst for about 5 years to becoming a data analyst. And now let's look at the cons of the treasury analysis. Okay, now what you have to know when it comes to Treasury is, I would say, when you take a work week of roughly 40 hours, I'm pretty sure from my 5.5 years experience that at least 1/3 of the week you're gonna do some administrative boring stuff. And that's at the end after 5 years where I've decided to leave Treasury analysis. I think Treasury analysis is fantastic, especially at the beginning, for the reason I just mentioned. But now let's move to the cons and why after a certain time it's time to move on, in my opinion. So first of all, the administrative tasks you need to do. So basically when you are opening or when you're closing a bank account, which always gonna be part of your job description as a treasury analyst, it takes a lot of paperwork, it takes a lot of signatures from some CFOs in some countries who are usually not happy to deal with you or don't have time for you. So you will spend an awful lot of time chasing people for signatures. You will always chase some banks or some insurance companies because they didn't send you the right stuff, or maybe it's the old paperwork or whatever. So you're gonna spend a ton of time also setting up new users because the old guy quit. You're dealing with the bank administration and the online platforms. Sometimes you feel very overqualified because it's just pure basic stupid work sometimes. I would say maybe a quarter or a third of your time. Lots of paperwork, as I just mentioned. And then there's another thing which is very annoying, and when I talk to my former treasury colleagues, I think we all agree, is relationships with slow partners. What do I mean? Usually, who are your counterparts in the treasury departments? You're dealing with banks, especially if you're working with multiple banks, and that's gonna be the case in bigger companies. You will lose a lot of time with very slow banks who react very slow to your inquiries and stuff like that. Exactly the same when treasury department is a little bit bigger and you have risk management as well. You're gonna have insurances, and insurance and banks are both very slow industries and slow pace people, let's put it like this. Then what you have to know in treasury, actually there are two branches, I would say. In a team you always have, let's say you have a team of 4. There's gonna be one who's gonna do the cash management, so the daily business, where what happened with the money yesterday and tomorrow and stuff like that, and also the payments. And the second is more like the reporting, the analytical guy. And sometimes, well, as a treasury analyst, you have to do a lot of cash management, and the daily activity tracking of your cash can be pretty boring if you are doing this mainly. Definitely say limited job opportunities, because look at how many financial analyst jobs you have in your neighborhood, and then look at how many treasury analyst jobs you have in your city, and you will see that there are only a few. That's because treasury analysts and treasurers in general are more specialized. It's a more specialized field than just the financial field. So it's gonna be a bit more complicated to find opportunities. And here I would also mention that inside of the team, let's say you start as a treasury analyst, at some point you're good, you become a senior treasury analyst, and then you're kind of stuck before you become maybe a manager one day. But same as with the financial analyst, you are a bit limited here when it comes to job opportunities and growing in the company. Now I'm gonna tell you why I moved from treasury analyst to become a data analyst. I have decided to become a data analyst and to specialize in business intelligence, well, especially for these reasons here. To give you a quick sum up, what is business intelligence and data analysis? Basically, you want to solve problems for somebody in your team or for other teams or clients with data. First of all, you have to understand the big problem of the team, then look at the data and see how you can solve this issue with data. The reason why it's very interesting for me after my experience is that it's a broader field. It's not only finance, it can be finance, that's why I put it in my financial jobs, because I still believe it belongs to finance, but it's a broader field because you can work for marketing department, for an external client, you can work for corporates, for consulting and all these kind of different environments. And also I have also worked for a few months as a data analyst for non-profit, for example. Pretty interesting stuff. To become a good data analyst, and I am getting there right now, you have to learn some basic programming. So I have done a lot of research, and from a coding perspective, you need to learn the easiest to learn languages, which are basically Python and SQL. I did like Excel at the beginning, but you are getting used to it, and especially when you see that how it's used, it gets easier and easier. So it's working, and you also need some visualization tools like Power BI and Tableau, which are gonna be helpful as well. So you definitely need to learn some software and a bit of programming, which makes it very challenging for myself. Then it's definitely a future-proof job. I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty about the future right now, but the one thing which is definitely sure is that data will play a bigger and bigger role in the future. So you need somebody who can analyze data in a fancy way and display it nicely. What is really rewarding, in my opinion, in this job and very nice is actually you are turning raw data, which means absolutely nothing standalone, into something meaningful and beautiful. Meaningful because it has to, you need to give it a meaning by using programming, for example, and then you have to display it nicely with visualization software, which is also very interesting in my opinion. And then it's definitely project work, because you are always trying to solve some issue, you are solving a question that can come from different departments. So it's always somehow related to a project, and you are moving on and learning. So this is the reason why I'm going into this after my financial experience. But there are some drawbacks, of course. From my very short experience as a data analyst, I would say there are two drawbacks here. First of all, as it's project work, it's usually longer hours, because as long as the question or the problem is not solved, you may have to work longer hours, and it can be a bit unexpected somewhere, but that's fine for me. And then second of all, there is kind of a steep learning curve. When you look at Treasury analysts and financial analysts, the tools you have to know, Excel, PowerPoint and all that kind of stuff, it's quite easy to learn. If you want to specialize inside it, it obviously takes more time. But here, to become a good data analyst, you have to know Python, you have to know SQL, Tableau, Power BI. All these things take longer. Right now, I'm doing a IBM certificate to become good in this kind of stuff. It's like 180 hours of coding and stuff like that. So it's definitely more challenging, and the entrance door is kind of more complicated to enter in, if you want. You know the different jobs you can enter in corporate finance. I have not talked about market finance because I have no professional experience as a trader or something like that. That's why I didn't want to talk about the market finance jobs. I wanted to tell you that next week I post once a week every Sunday, and next week I'm gonna talk about how to finance a project as a company. Should I finance it through a loan? Should I use my cash? Or should I ask my investor to finance it? So that's gonna be next week. Make sure to subscribe, make sure to like if you like that content. Ask questions in the comments below. And see you soon, guys. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.